Midway between the bright lights of London's buzzing theatreland and the sombre atmosphere of its Inns of Court lies Great Queen Street, home since 1775 to the Grand Lodge of England. Way back in 1717, when the first Grand Lodge was held, it wasn't in Great Queen Street, but just over a mile away in St Paul's Churchyard at the Goose and Gridiron Tavern. But it soon proved too small, so in 1773, Grand Lodge bought 61 Great Queen Street for 3,000 guineas. The original site consisted of two houses, one behind the other, with a small courtyard in between. The rear building and the upper floors of the one at the front were used for Masonic business, but the ground floor front was rented out to Brother Luke Riley as the Freemasons Tavern and Coffee House. There was a small garden at the rear, which was to be the site of the first hall. It was built by Thomas Sandby in 1776 at a cost of £3,000. A new hall, added in the 1860s, is now the Grand Hall of the Connaught Rooms. Today, this white-painted brickwork is all that remains of the exterior of the original building. The idea for the present building was proposed by the Duke of Connaught in 1919, but it took 8 years to buy up the surrounding land and find the right design. Architects were given details of the general requirements, but were left to incorporate these in their own designs. Many plans were submitted, one from as far away as Canada, but eventually the contract was awarded to Ashley and Winton Newman. Work began in 1927 and was completed in 1933. Complicated negotiations took place between the planning committee and the local council, resulting in the redesigning of the western approaches to allow a wide space leading up to the ceremonial entrance of the building, which can be seen over a quarter of a mile away in Covent Garden. The doors below the clock tower are only opened on ceremonial occasions, such as the quarterly communications of Grand Lodge, or when brethren are being honoured with promotion, such as London Grand Rank. At all other times, visitors use the main doors, situated at the front of the building. With the building being situated in the grimy heart of London for more than 60 years, planned maintenance is essential. This unusual view of the exterior lasted for 26 weeks and will probably not be seen again for nearly 75 years. During the 6-month period, 900 windows were replaced, the asphalt roof was relaid, and the stonework thoroughly washed, bringing the building back to near its 1933 pristine condition. The busiest place in the building is the entrance lobby. It's estimated that over 250,000 people pass over this floor every year. And they come for a number of reasons, one of which may be to visit Letchworth's shop, which is tucked away around the corner in what used to be the Grand Tiler's office. The shop sells all kinds of Grand Lodge publications, as well as a great many other Masonic gifts and souvenirs. It's staffed entirely by volunteers, and any profits go to the Grand Charity. It's also one of the few places in the country that you can buy a book of constitutions over the counter. Most of the visitors are members of the 1,000+ lodges that meet here. There are 23 permanent temples or lodge rooms in daily use, each one varying in style and design. Temple number 10 is situated just below the clock tower. The walls are rather unusual because they're made of pumice stone. If you strike one of these pillars, it remarks a hollow sound. They're part of the iron and steel framework used in the building's construction, then clad to disguise them. Another interesting feature is the lighting. Rays of amber light behind the master's chair beam upwards, representing the rising sun. The light behind the junior warden's chair is at its brightest, representing the sun at its meridian, while the ruddy glow behind the senior warden's chair reminds us of the setting sun. This temple is the only one, apart from the Grand Temple, to boast a pipe organ, although this one is operated electronically. It's been used on many occasions when choir and organ have joined together, such as at the consecration of a lodge or chapter, and it sounds great. Light is used to effect through the stained glass windows at the east and west ends in Lodge Room 17. The distinctive panelling and furniture of number 17 Lodge Room, as well as the white swan of Buckinghamshire behind the senior warden's chair, serve to remind us of the generous support and large donation that province made to the building fund. The paintings are the property of the Lodge of Antiquity number 2, one of the 4 original lodges. They're always given this room, and it seems fitting that the painting behind the master's chair is of Anthony Sayer, the first Grand Master. Lodge Room 23, although one of the smallest, is no way less significant. The master's chair that I'm sitting in, as well as the warden's chairs, are actually on loan from the Grand Master's Lodge number 1. Another feature of the room are the portraits adorning the walls, which depict Grand Secretaries, past and present. Amongst some of the most recent are Sir Philip Colville, Sir Sidney White, Sir James Stubbs, and Commander Michael Higham. This is the largest of the permanent temples, number 1. It was originally intended for Supreme Grand Chapter, but it soon became too small, so those meetings now take place upstairs in the Grand Temple. Although too small for Supreme Grand Chapter, the Lodge Room still seats 600. And to ensure that every brother can hear what's being said, a sound system has been installed to assist those with hearing difficulties. The portraits along these walls are some of the past Grand Masters, all resplendently dressed, except, that is, for this man here, Lord Peter. He was Grand Master from 1772 to 1776, and incidentally one of the few Catholics ever to hold that office. Now, unlike the others, apparently Lord Peter was never actually painted in his stately robes. That's why in this portrait he's just wearing his normal day clothes. Back in the lobby, other visitors would have been asking directions to a very different part of the building and have been directed down long, hardwood-lined corridors past the imposing statue of the Duke of Sussex, which formerly stood behind the Master's chair in the previous Grand Temple, to various committee rooms where appeals and petitions are heard, and where some private lodges hold their general purpose meetings. All of these gatherings are overlooked by huge paintings in heavy gilt frames of prominent former brethren, looking sternly down on the modern-day proceedings. At the end of this corridor, the surroundings start to change. The panelling becomes richer. There are mosaics. And plaques dating back to the 1700s. and everything suggests that behind these doors is a room of some importance. And there is, the boardroom. Its atmosphere, with its polished mahogany and hushed air of expectancy, led a film company to choose it to stage a courtroom drama. And you can see why. Usually it's not a judge who sits in this chair, but the president of the Board of General Purposes. Incidentally, the occasional buzzing that you can hear in the room is from these vast halogen lights that, when they're switched on, can take anything up to 20 minutes to reach full brightness. Grammar teaches us the proper arrangement of words, enabling us to speak or read a language accurately. Rhetoric teaches us to speak fluently on any subject. With logic, we learn to guide our reason discretionally in the general knowledge of things. Arithmetic, the property of numbers as they are expressed by letters, figures, tables, and instruments. Geometry, the ability to form plans and designs through length, breadth, and thickness. Music, the art of forming concords so as to produce a delightful harmony. And astronomy, which enables the contemplative mind to soar aloft and contemplate the wisdom, power, and goodness of the Creator. The President receives advice and guidance from the members of the board. Recommendations made in this room and adopted by Grand Lodge could affect Freemasons throughout the world. The board may sit and work in regal splendor, but such is not the case for all the 100 plus workers in the building. In this office, the cashier and his staff deal with all monies received and paid out by Grand Lodge and the Grand Charity during the year. In another office, staff deal with the day-to-day running of over 1,600 London lodges and nearly 700 chapters. The largest office houses the Records and Petitions Department, where most of the membership applications are stored on computers. Now, if you're a Master Mason and you've received your Grand Lodge certificate, like this one, then you may have wondered how the seal of Grand Lodge is attached. Well, here's the answer. And there we have it, the finished article, Audi Vidi Tasse. Along this panelled corridor is the administrative heart of English Freemasonry, the Grand Secretary's office. Visitors are shown into this small, though impressive-looking waiting room before they're ushered into the main office. They may think they'll see the Grand Secretary just the other side of this door, but that's not the case. First, there is the office secretary. Then, at the other end of the room, his personal secretary. She acts rather like a private personal secretary in a ministry. From the paperwork on the small table, you can judge just how busy the Grand Secretary's position is. It seems very different from this 1930s photograph of the office. This is how the room looked in the old building, with the Grand Secretary sitting behind the same desk as today. Another piece of furniture which links all these scenes is the bookcase, bought in 1717 for just £11, 5s. This is the General Inquiry Office. Now the doors are over 10 feet tall, and the ceiling is so high that it almost disappears into the gloomy depths. Considering that the building was only constructed in 1933, how tall did these architects think we were going to be? If you think the administrative offices are a bit of a rabbit warren, then there's something else to see. The layout of this basement area is so confusing that some members of staff don't even come down here for fear of getting lost. Now, where am I going? With over 1,000 lodges and chapters meeting in the building, storing their furniture is a constant problem. That's why rooms like these are absolutely crammed with lockers. There are so many of them that they're spilling out into the corridors. But not only that, new ones can be found in almost any room where there's available space. This is my one, by the way. To transport all the lodge possessions from here to the lodge rooms on the upper floors, a team of porters is required. Items are loaded onto trolleys and whisked away by lift, ready for the tilers to lay out the lodges. And, of course, it all has to be safely returned. As you can imagine, with a building of this size, there's a certain amount of wear and tear. That's why there's a fully equipped carpenter's shop and upholstery department. And believe it or not, this chair will end up being completely restored. Even in remote parts of the building, there are valuable furnishings to be cared for. Obviously, these chairs haven't quite made it into the system yet, but I'm sure they will eventually. Another support area is the engineering workshop, fully equipped to deal with almost any emergency. Electrical maintenance has its own department too. Not only do the electricians deal with the lighting and power within the building, they're also responsible for the in-house sound system installed in the Grand Temple and Number 1 Temple. They also operate the radio mics used by guest speakers during lectures or seminars. Obviously, with valuable equipment such as this, when the workshops are unattended, the doors are kept firmly locked. One door which certainly isn't locked is this one. The offices of the Quattro Coronati Correspondence Circle and home of the premier lodge of Masonic research. This worldwide organisation has members in every country where Freemasonry exists, and its daily post bag brings hundreds of questions from the four corners of the earth. Also housed in this office is a small shop containing a wide variety of books for Freemasons, together with an extensive range of regalia and many other Masonic items of interest to brethren. Behind the scenes is a much larger international mail order service, providing a much-needed facility to the craft in general. There are racks and racks of lodge banners, some of which are very old and may be in need of repair. But down here in the depths of Grand Lodge, even that isn't a problem. Some years ago, a small department was established to deal with the maintenance of fabrics and soft furnishings in the building. The expertise of the women here incorporates embroidery and even working with fine gold and silver wire. This department has grown out of all proportion to its original beginnings. Not only can they repair and maintain banners and regalia, but on this very expensive computer-controlled embroidery machine, they can create new banners or copy existing ones. The designs are stored on disk, and should the original be destroyed, duplicates could be made at any time.
Thank you, Anna. It's worth remembering that any lodge that's having a banner made for the first time, the design must have been approved by the Grand Secretary's office first.
Although most of the information used by the registration department is these days stored on computer, they still refer to the hundreds of thousands of documents kept down here in the vaults. Before the days of modern computerization, all of the membership records dating back as far as the mid-1800s were kept on cards in these files. But this is the Million File, which records the names of every Freemason who contributed £1 towards the cost of constructing this very building. Since the formation of Grand Lodge, one of its duties has been to receive petitions and then grant warrants to private lodges. Now, once the founders have submitted their petition and it's been processed, it's stored down here. And just reading through some of the names on the earliest petitions is like reading a page from Who's Who or Burke's Peerage. Also stored down here, in these extremely large and heavy volumes, are records of the contributions made to Grand Lodge dating back to the early 1800s. Now, if I can find my way out of here, I'll show you more.
The vaults are by no means the lowest level of the building. The sub-basement and below contain many surprising features. The initial design in the late 1920s incorporated a heating system, advanced for its time, but sadly by today's standards outmoded. The original system boasted the heavy cast iron construction much favoured in those days. And some of those items, as you can see, still remain. But the majority has been superseded by this modern, efficient, computerised plant.
At one time, this whole gallery was a buzzing control room with knobs, dials, throw switches, and all manner of other devices needed to run the equipment. Now all that's needed is a simple computer. A sign of the times. As you can appreciate, we're already fairly deep down towards the very bottom of the building. But we haven't quite got down to its lowest point. Follow me. At its construction, the building was remarkably ahead of its time, with several subterranean passages running underneath it. These passages are effectively wind tunnels for the heating and air conditioning systems. And in fact, these supporting pillars have actually been designed aerodynamically to minimize drag and allow the air to flow on its way through the building.
Huge fans draw the air in, pass it through filters and up, via heat exchangers, to the lodge rooms on the higher floors. The air is then drawn down again and extracted from under the seating and lower skirting boards.
Now, you might expect a rather large fan like that to be kept downstairs in the basement, but in fact, it's not. Where it is on the roof.
The clock tower is level with Lord Nelson, and incidentally, Edward Hodges Bailey, who sculpted Lord Nelson, was also responsible for the Duke of Sussex statue in the corridor we saw earlier. Nelson looks out over the rooftops of London, past the Palace of Westminster and Big Ben, and on towards the city. Here, the dome of St. Paul's, struggling to be seen on the modern skyline, marks the spot alongside which was the Goose and Gridiron Tavern, where the first meeting of Grand Lodge took place in 1717. On the north side of the building, competing with ever taller office blocks, the Telecom Tower is still head and shoulders above the rest.
We came from the basement to the roof via the magic of television, but you'd have to use a slightly more conventional route, namely via the main staircase.
And this is the main staircase, which in part 2 we'll be looking at in more detail, as well as exploring the Grand Temple and the other rooms it leads to above.